on the site and just ask. But I've been in the middle of moving and touring. So moving in the middle of my summer season has caused some confusion.
Don't worry about it, John. It's not a problem. I can come on.
When can you do? When are you good for?
I'm good for any time. You should know that. But if you mean what date am I available?
Well, I'll send you a list of available dates in a minute.
All right, yeah,
not in a minute. And I know where the diary is in the chaos of my move. I'm surrounded by, it's like when you move, I'm just surrounded by bags. Anyway, we are being live streamed. Let's stop the chit chat. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And tonight is all the way from New Mexico, as opposed to Manchester. It's Bob Kanegis. You would have had Rona Babu, but I failed miserably to write her name in my diary. So we will have that treat in a few weeks' time, or maybe next week, or I'll have a discussion with her. But right now, can you put your hands together and welcome Bob Kanegis from New Mexico? Sitting in New Mexico, actually live from New Mexico. Marvelous. Okay, go for it, Bob.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to start the way I start all my programs, live, Zoom, day, night. So let's imagine that we are getting ready to kindle a campfire. We're out underneath the stars. Maybe the moon is coming up. So we're going to start the fire the old-fashioned way. Could everybody please rub your hands together until you feel the warmth? Okay, send that warmth to the fire and watch the sparks go up into the night sky. Rub your hands. And perhaps you saw the full moon last night, the super full moon. All right, rub your hands together one more time until they're nice and warm. And when you really feel that heat, put your hands on your heart to remember that everybody here in the room, wherever you are, you're watching on live stream, we're all human beings with beating hearts. And I hope you're feeling warm-hearted towards yourself and the people that you're with right now. And thank you, everybody, for supporting global warming, global heartwarming. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pour, I've been thinking about Morocco a lot. So I brought my tea. I'll start remembering all those wonderful cups of tea I had with friends and storytellers and shopkeepers in Morocco and Marrakesh. Here's to you all. One of the things I loved about my time in Marrakesh last February was all of the music that we heard and the drumming and the dancing. I went to a music store to buy a tambourine for my wife, Liz. This magic of this Zoom screen, it disappears. There it is. Okay. So I thought, all right, let's find a story with a tambourine in it. And I remembered this story from Spain. It's a story that Ruth Sawyer told in a book called Picture Tales from Spain. And let's begin. We'll do a 1, 2, 3. Once upon a time to wake us up here. So 1, 2, 3. Once upon a time, there was a king who had, well, at least 3 loves. 4, 5. He loved his wife. He loved his daughter, the Infanta, who's was close to his heart. But he truly, truly loved to laugh. And more than anything, this king loved riddles. One day, as he was being dressed by his chamberlain in his royal purple robe and purple velvet shoes, suddenly he felt something on his arm. And he looked, it was a flea. How remarkable, said the king. a flea sucking blood from the royal personage. This flea now has my blood. It must be a royal flea. And how should we treat a royal flea, said the king. Well, of course, we should treat this flea royally. And so the king ordered the flea to be pastured in a huge cage and be given all kinds of fine things to eat. Now, the king had an idea what he might do with a very fat flea one day. Now, after about a month, the flea, who he had named Philippa, because he was growing fond of this flea, after about a month, the flea was the size of a mouse. And after 2 months, the flea was the size of a cat that would chase the mouse. And after 6 months, the flea was, well, the size of a dog that would chase the cat. And after a year, Philippa the flea was as big as a small calf. And oh, the king would come and share his deepest thoughts, his concerns, his joys, his sorrows with his new friend, Philippa. And it was a wonderful, wonderful friendship. This is the hard part of the story to tell everybody, but no one lives forever, not even a flea. And so one day, in her sleep, Philippa the flea took her last breath, but she died with a smile on her face, thinking of all the wonderful times and the great friendship that she had with the king. And now the king thought, what should I do with Philippa? And then he remembered just how much he loved riddles. And he thought, I know what I'll do. And so he had Philippa skinned. And he took the skin of that great giant flea and he stretched it and he scraped it and scraped it and tanned it until it was as smooth as silk. Then he had Philippa's skin stretched over a tambourine. And then he called his daughter, Belita, together. Belita, let's have some fun. This is our new tambourine, and I'd like to play it. I'd like you to dance to it. We'll make a riddle from it. And if any young man from near or far can solve the riddle, well, you know, it's about time you were married. It would have to be a very smart, wise young man to solve the riddle. And so he made up this riddle. I guess the tambourine disappears when I do this, but by the magic of Zoom, he made up the riddle. Philippa, Belita, they play well together. Philippa, Belita, can you tell me whether you know this Philippa, this Animalita? If you guess right, you can marry Belita. The king made a proclamation. He sent it out all across the land. Anyone who could solve the riddle could marry his daughter. Philippa, Belita, they play well together. Philippa, Belita, can you tell me whether you know this Philippa, this Animalita? If you guess right, you can marry Belita. Well, you can be sure, because the king was very rich. Belita was very rich and quite fair to look at as well. And so princes from all over the countryside came to try and answer the riddle. And princes from far away, from France, from Portugal, from Tasmania came. And they were smart lads. They were quite smart. They soon realized that the riddle had something to do with a tambourine. One young man, perhaps he was the the prince from Zanzibar said, "Oh, well, I think this is made from goat skin." "Wrong," said the king, "go away." Another prince, the Prince of Portugal, said, "Sheepskin for sure." "Wrong, go away." "Cow skin." And so it was a constant parade of young princes eager to marry Belita. After a while, the king, and perhaps Belita too, grew tired of the game. No one was answering the riddle. And so the king sent out word that the next young man who tried to answer the riddle and failed would be. And that put an end to the parade of princes and other seekers. But up in a small village in the mountains, there was a poor family with a young son named Juan Bobo. And Juan Bobo thought, "Oh, now he was a shepherd. Wouldn't it be wonderful if a shepherd, a poor shepherd boy like me, could marry a princess?" "Mom," he said, I'm going to the capital. I'm going to go see the king. I'm going to try and solve the riddle and marry a princess." Oh, his mother grew terribly alarmed. "Juan Bobo, please, all these princes who tried and failed, they were educated young men. They've been to school. You haven't even been to school. You can barely read and write. Please, just don't go and save yourself a hanging." Juan Bobo was absolutely determined. And he said, "Mother, I am going with your blessing or without." And so what did she do? She gave Juan Bobo her blessing, and then she cooked up a tortilla and put it in his little shepherd's pouch so that he had something to eat. And down the road went Juan Bobo on his way, hopefully to marry a princess. Now he had gone some way when suddenly he heard a little voice. "Hey, Pastor, Pastor, where are you going?" He looked around. Where was that voice coming from? And he saw it was a little hormiguita, a little ant. "Well," said Juan Bobo with his chest puffed out, he said, I'm going to the king's palace, and I'm going to marry a princess." "I've never been to the king's palace before," said the little ant. Let me ride in your sack, in your little pouch." Juan Bobo said, "Oh, no, you can't ride in my pouch. You have all those dirty little feet from walking on the ground. You'd spoil my tortilla." "Oh, I'll dust off on my feet before I get in your pouch." "All right," said Juan Bobo. He opened his pouch, and the hormiguita, the ant, jumped in. Down the road he went, wondering what the riddle would be. And he hadn't gone much further when he heard another voice. "Pastor, where are you going?" This was coming from a beetle. "Oh, I'm going to the palace. I'm going to marry a princess." "I've never been to the palace before. Open your pouch and let me jump in." "Oh, I don't know. I don't want you walking all over my tortilla." I'll cling to the sides. Don't worry. I won't bother your tortilla. Let me in. I've never been to the palace." So Juan Bobo opened his pouch again, and the beetle jumped in. Not far from the palace, again, he heard a voice. "Juan Bobo, Pastor, where are you going with such determined steps?" "I'm going to the palace. I'm going to marry a princess," said Juan Bobo. Oh, it was a little mouse, Ratoncito Perez. But the little mouse said, I've never, the palace, a princess. I've never seen a palace. I've never seen a princess. Take me with you." "I can't take you with me. You have mouse breath. I don't want to get mouse breath all over my tortilla." Ratoncito Perez said, "Oh, that's simple. No problem. Why don't you take out the tortilla and let's all have lunch right now?" "Good idea," said Juan Bobo. He opened his pouch. He took out the tortilla. He ate most of it. He gave a little crumb to the ant, a bigger crumb to the beetle, and an even bigger Crum to Ratoncito Perez. Then his three traveling companions went back into the pouch. Juan Bobo made his way to the great gates of the palace, and then for the first time, he stopped and thought about what he was about to do. What was the last thing, the last word that he had heard? Anyone who failed to answer the riddle would lose his life. "What are you waiting for?" cried Ormiguita. I'm waiting for my courage to come back. I'm not sure that I want a hanging. Don't worry, we'll help you. We'll help you solve the riddle. And so the gates opened up, and first the lackeys, and then the footman, and then the chamberlain brought Juan Bobo into the presence of the king. And the king looked at Juan Bobo, this simple peasant with his shepherd's staff and a shepherd pouch, and he said, "You're here to solve the riddle?" "I am," said Juan Bobo. "Oh, pobrecito, poor boy." He said, "You better go home now. You better go home now. You know I'll have to hang you if you fail. I don't really care to hang you." Now, Felipa was looking on as well. Belita, Belita, the Infanta, the daughter, and she honestly didn't really like the looks of this peasant lass, but alas, it was her responsibility to dance when her father said dance, and so the dance began. Do you remember the riddle? Let's try it. Felipa, Belita, they play well together. Can I hear you? Felipa, I'll pretend I'm hearing you. Felipa, Belita, they play well together. Felipa, Belita, can you tell me whether? You know this, Felipa, this animalita. If you guess right, you can marry Belita. Felipa, Belita, they play well together. Felipa, Belita, can you tell me whether you know this, Felipa, this animalita? If you guess right, you can marry Belita. Juan Bobo stood there with his mouth open, his eyes staring ahead, with not the slightest clue what the riddle could mean. "What are you waiting for?" said the king. "We don't have all day. Answer me quickly, or off to the gallows." Juan Bobo said. From inside the pouch came the voice of the little Ormiguita. "Oh, Juan Bobo, it's got something to do with the tambourine. Let me out. I'm going to go investigate." Without anyone noticing, Juan Bobo opened the pouch. The little Ormiguita, the ant, crawled down to the floor, up the leg of the king, and onto the tambourine. He made a circle around it. He went back to Juan Bobo. He crawled into Juan Bobo's ear, up to his ear, and he said, "It's from an insect. I know it anywhere. It's a flea. The skin of the tambourine is made from a flea." Juan Bobo blurted it out. "Felipa is a flea." "You're absolutely right," said the king. "Then I can marry Belita?" "Well, of course." Suddenly, this is the part of the story where I have to tell you that in case you didn't know this, that all princesses are not all sweetness and light. And Belita had a tantrum. "I don't want to marry this peasant. I won't do it. I won't do it. You can't make me." "Oh, you don't have to marry. You don't have to marry the shepherd," said the king. Juan Bobo gave him the eye and said, "I'll be the one who decides that. Well, I'll give you anything that you ask for, and Belita will give you something as well." Well, Juan Bobo had gotten a taste of Belita already. He was happy to make a deal. He said, "Well, I'd like a cart to carry me home." The ant called out, and 2 oxen to carry it, to to draw it home. And what about you, Delita? What will you give me? Well, I'll give you, ask for a sack of gold, called out Ratoncita Purita. I'd like a sack of gold. He usually said, I have all the gold I need. And so when the chancellor of the exchequer, the finance minister, went off to get gold, the little mouse began to gnaw a hole in Juan Bobo's pocket. And when the treasurer came back, he began to take gold out of the sack and put it into Juan Bobo's pocket. But the gold fell through his pocket and landed and began to fill up as a heap around his legs. The king said, "Oh, that's a lot of gold." "Yeah, I think that's enough gold," said Juan Bobo. "That's plenty." Juan Bobo took the gold, had it put in the cart, and made his way back home. I don't know what happened to Belita, but I do know that Juan Bobo went back home, was a rich man for the rest of his life, married a simple peasant girl from his own village, and they may still be living there happily ever after. The flea. All right. A little more tea. Well, how's everybody doing there today? Did you see the super moon last night? How many people? I see some people in the room, and I know there are other people out there all around the world. The cool thing about the full moon is it's full everywhere in the world. It's full on the same night, and this was last night was the night that the moon was closest to the Earth that it's going to be all year, and it was the second full moon of the year. Liz and I went down to the river, which is about a half a mile from where I live. And as the moon came up, we looked across the river in the twilight, because the full moon comes up just as the sun is setting. And in that crepuscular light, we saw a coyote come down to the river and drink. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful sight. I love where we live. I love living here in New Mexico. This year's been a little tough, though. It's this summer has been brutally hot. And I know it's been hot in Europe. I know it's been hot in Morocco. Well, I was going to tell you that it's not the weather that brought tears to my eyes, but I was actually crying yesterday. Yeah. Well, nothing bad had happened. I was crying because I was cutting onions for onion soup. Made a nice pot of French onion soup. And the thing is that I love to cook with vegetables from our garden, but it has been so hot this summer that most of my gardening efforts have failed. And for one reason or another, the heat got all the leaf crops. And then these big caterpillars called tomato hornworms got my tomatoes. And the basil dried up. The rabbits ate all my carrots. This was a really hard year for gardening. But the one thing that survived and actually was doing quite well were onions. Dried onions for onion soup. As I was cooking the onion soup, I thought about a story about it. The humble onion. Oh, there was once a farmer here in New Mexico. His name was Mariano, and he lived a simple, humble life with his wife and children, and often he made a poor but adequate living selling his vegetables at markets and farmers markets. But this year, This was a long time ago. It's a story that was told, but apparently it was a year just as rough as the year we've been having here in the land of enchantment this year. Most of his crops had failed, but luckily his onions flourished. He had sacks and sacks of onions, more onions than his family could ever eat. And so he had onions to sell. The problem was that he wasn't the only one who had had difficulty with his crops. Almost everyone's crops had failed, but everyone had onions. And so there was absolutely no market for his onions. He went from stall to stall, from village to village. And luckily he had onions to eat because he was gone for a long time. He couldn't sell a single onion. What was he to do? He couldn't go back home empty-handed. And so he kept on walking from village to village, day after day. It may be that he crossed the border. It may be that he crossed the border into another land, but just at that point where he felt like he could not possibly take one more step, he took one more step. He blinked 3 times, he looked around, and suddenly he was in a green and verdant land. There were birds singing, there were people merrily going by in just wonderful moods. One of the people who passed by said, Oh, are you going to the feast? Well, what feast? Asked Mariano. This is the annual feast that our king gives. He said, the king is a great gourmand. He loves to eat. He loves to share food. And once a year, he invites everyone in this village to come and join him at the feast. Everyone is invited. Please come right away. It's about to start. Mariano was, with his bag of onions over his shoulder, was caught up in the excitement, and he went through the palace gates. Quite a different situation than when Juan Bobo went through the palace gates of that other king. But this was, the great feast was laid out, and to his utter amazement, he was seated right next to the king. For it had been decreed that anytime a stranger came to town during the great feast, that stranger would be seated by the seat right next to the king. The food came out, and it was just the most wonderful food that Juan Bobo had ever tasted. Now, one of the dishes, and the king asked all about Mariano's life, and he seemed genuinely interested as the food came, one dish after another. The king then turned to Mariano and he said, I wonder how you like the food, and please be honest with me. Mariano said, Oh, Your Highness, he said, the food is absolutely delicious, but since you're asking, he said, the vegetable soup that was served would perhaps benefit from a few onions in it. Onions? Onions, said the king. What is an onion? I've never heard of such a thing. An onion? Now, it happened that even though the king was a gourmand, even though he had tasted things from near and far, he had never heard of, tasted, or even seen an onion before. And so, reaching into a sack, Mariano brought out an onion. This is an onion, Your Highness. And if you'll permit me, tomorrow I'll show your cooks how to prepare an onion. And if it pleases you, I'll show your gardeners how to grow onions. Oh, I'd be delighted with that, said the king. And so the next day, Mariano spent the day with the king's cooks, and that day, that evening, the king had onions in his soup. He had onions roasted. They had onions raw, and he absolutely fell in love with the flavors, the deep flavors of this most exotic vegetable, the most exotic vegetable he had ever seen. Yes, he said, yes, please, tomorrow, teach my gardeners how to grow onions. I will, said Mariano, and he did. And now, of course, Mariano had been gone for a long time. He begged the king to release him, to let him go home to his family, to his previous simple life. The king, of course, as one would expect in life, or certainly in this story, wanted to reward Mariano richly. But first he said, you have brought great happiness to me. He said, kneel before me, Mariano. And the king took his scepter, touched his head, and said, I now name you Knight of Onions. Knight of Onions, I must reward you, and I will give you your weight in gold. And he did. How long it took Mariano to get back home from that land beyond land, perhaps from that time beyond time, who can say? But eventually he did make his way home. And one of the very first things that Mariano did was that he used some of that gold to put on a great feast for his friends and neighbors. And remembering the king's feast, set a place for any strangers that might come into town that day. Well, there's something about stories like this from all over the world that always happens. There's a greedy man, there's a jealous man, there's a stingy old neighbor, a miser, who, rather than being happy for Mariano and his good fortune, was jealous, just wickedly jealous. But trying to hide that and putting on a happy face, he asked Mariano what the source of his good fortune was. How was it that he left with a sack of onions over his back and came back with a sack filled with gold? Mariano was happy to tell him the whole story. He was generous. He was open-hearted. The gift must always move. He said, yes, he said, I'll tell you what. He said, it was all because I brought the king a vegetable, a flavor that he had never tasted before. And believe it or not, he had never tasted onions. And for my sack of onions, he gave me the sack of gold. Without a thank you, that miser went home, harvested the onions that I'm sorry. he missing a very important point here. He thought, if onions are so valuable, what if the king has never tasted garlic? King who's never tasted onions perhaps has never tasted garlic. And so he had his own small crop of garlic. Garlic had made it through those hot days as well. He used his considerable riches to buy up every clove of garlic in all the surrounding towns, and he made his way in the direction that Mariano had indicated. He made that long, arduous trip. He stepped over that threshold into that verdant and green land and arrived, as we would expect, on the day of the annual feast. He found himself sitting by the side of the king. Now, his conversation with the king seemed to bring him no pleasure. It was more of a dull conversation with him, because he was just simply waiting. In fact, as soon as the lamb came out, he said, "Oh, Your Highness," he said, "please, you'll have to forgive me." But he said, "This lamb really needs some garlic to flavor it." "Garlic," said the king. "That's a word I've never heard. It's a root," said the root of a plant, said the miser, he said, and I've so happened to bring many sacks of garlic with me. He said, and if you will permit me, I will teach your cook to cook with garlic, to season your foods. And if you'd like, I'll teach your gardeners how to plant garlic. Oh, I would very much like that, said the king, hoping for more good culinary fortune. And so the next day, the miser taught the king's cook how to cook with garlic. And the next day, the lamb roast came out with roasted garlic cloves. And the king was absolutely delighted. It was the most delicious lamb he had ever tasted. Oh, he instructed the miser to teach the cook how to cook with this rare, unusual herb. He instructed the miser to teach his gardeners how to grow garlic. And then, eager to get his reward, which he was sure would be even greater than Mariano's, he told the king that he was eager to get home to his humble life. Oh, of course. But first, kneel before me. The king took out a scepter, named the miser the Knight of Garlic, and then thought, oh, he said, I love garlic. I love garlic more than anything. It's almost as valuable as life, even more valuable. How can I give you the most valued thing I possibly can? And then he realized he was generous and good meaning. And so he called his chancellor and said, bring this man his reward, bring him his weight and the most valuable and dear thing to me. Bring him a sack of onions. And so it was. Okay. Just for that. Onions and garlic. So I think there are some people in this room who have probably told a version of that story somewhere. I've heard that there are versions of that story from France and maybe from Italy. Let's see, the spinach. Maybe you tell that in Greece. I don't know. I'd certainly cook with some garlic. Yes. Okay. How are we doing on time? I tend to lose track here. I don't hear anybody. Let's see.
Plenty of time, Bob. We have plenty of time.
Okay. Maybe one more story?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Let's do it.
Bob, can I just say I'm in Italy at the moment, so I've had onions and garlic up to here for the last 3 months. I'm eating it every day, but loving it. Yeah, another grand.
You know, one of the reasons that I love that story in particular is my grandmother. All my grandparents came from Lithuania, Ukraine, Belarus. My grandmother came over to this country when she was a teenager by herself. And she told me that she was so poor that she pretty much subsisted on onions and cabbage soup. And so onions, cebollas. All right. What can I tell for the last story? Let's see. I mentioned that coyote that I saw down by the Bosque the other day. And we love to tell coyote stories here in New Mexico. There's coyote stories all over the West. John, I'm sure you've heard coyote stories when you were in the States. We tell them here in New Mexico. Here's one. This is a Pueblo story. My version of it, I heard it from my friend Joe Hayes, that subsequently saw it in a book. And so this time of year, if you were to come here and sit out on our back porch with us, tonight, while the almost full moon came up, you would hear high up in the trees, particularly if you're hearing this better than me, because I don't hear high-pitched sounds as well anymore, but you'd hear this high-pitched, this frenetic buzzing. And that's from cicadas. Some people here call them locusts. And they're big. For those of you who don't know, they're huge bugs about this big, and they have this amazing ability to. Well, I should a little science lesson here first. You know, everybody here, we've all got our bones inside our bodies, right? Okay, children who are listening, you know, you can feel those. You can feel those bones inside our bodies. We have an endoskeleton, that means inside our body. But many insects have an exoskeleton. Their skeleton that keeps all their innards together is on the outside of their body. And so when they grow, if they start off small, they get a small little skeleton. But what happens? The skeleton doesn't grow. Their bodies grow. So what do they have to do? They have to basically unzip the old small skeleton, crawl out, leave that small skeleton behind, and grow a new exoskeleton that will fit until they grow a little bit larger. And they do this a number of times until finally they are large enough to fly away. All right. One, two, three. Once upon a time, Coyote was walking along, as he usually does, with his tail up in the air, proud of how intelligent he was, proud of how smart he was, proud of how brave he was, proud of that bushy tail, when suddenly he heard, "It's summer." Ooh, said Coyote, I like that song. I'm going to learn that song. I'll sing it to my children as a lullaby at night. Ooh, I'll sing it to my wife. She'll cozy up to me. She'll love that song. The coyote followed it. And he came to a tree, and there at the base of the tree was a cicada singing her song. And Coyote looked at Cicada and said, "Hey, I like that song. I want you to teach me that song. I'm going to sing it to my kids and my wife. They'll love me even more." Cicada knew all about Coyote. All the animals around here know about Coyote. They know what he's like. And Cicada said, "Coyote, that's my song. That's not your song. You have your own song. Sing your own song." Coyote looked right at Cicada and said, "Did you hear what I said? I'm not asking you to teach me that song. I'm telling you to teach me that song." He flashed a few of his teeth. Back at that time, he had nice straight teeth, and he big keen eyes, and he flashed them, and Cicada knew that he meant business. All right, Coyote, now listen very carefully. Summer. Okay, I know I'm not going to be able to hear you, but maybe could you all unmute for a moment? Give me your, that nasal. I'm going to hear this. I mean, this is as interactive as we can get, right? All right. Higher. Beautiful. Oh, no wonder Coyote wanted to learn that song. That was beautiful. Wow. So Coyote said, Cicada said to Coyote, okay, you got it? I've got it. And so Coyote began to lope back towards home, singing the song. And just then, he tripped in a gopher hole, banged his head on a rock. Song was completely out of his head. He made his way back to Cicada. There she was. I forgot the song. I need you to sing it to me again. Get going, sing it now. Cicada didn't put up any obstacles this time. All right, Coyote, but you should really try and listen more carefully this time. Are you really listening this time? Listen. Summer. Off Coyote went, loping along, thinking about how wonderful it was going to be to get home and sing that song. And this time it was one of these hot New Mexico days. He decided to take a nap, and when he woke up, what had happened? The song had gone out of his head. He made his way back for a third time to Cicada, and this time Cicada said, Coyote, I'm not gonna sing that song again for you. You've already forgotten it twice. You're gonna sing that song for me right now from where you sit, or you're gonna sing that song from inside my stomach. So what's it gonna be? And so, recognizing the threat, reluctantly, Cicada sang the song one more time. All right, everybody, fingers up, up in the air. Coyote took off. Now, we already know that Coyote is going to forget the song again, right? Yeah, Coyote is going to forget the song again. That's what Cicada was thinking about. And she thought, I'm tired of this bully. I'm tired of his foolishness. And then she felt something in her body. Her exoskeleton was getting a little bit tight. That's when she thought, time to unzip. Time to come out. Time to fly away. And so Cicada did what cicadas do. That hard shell of hers split right vertically down the middle. And she wiggled out of that skin, that temporary skin. But before she flew away, she started picking up little rocks. She filled that exoskeleton that was clinging to the bark of the tree now with pebbles and rocks. And then she took a little bit of that sticky pine sap from the pinon tree, the pine nut tree, where she had been singing. She sealed up that seam. And then she flew away. I think I heard her last night. She might have been flying by my porch. Well, Coyote came back. He forgot the song one more time. And there was Cicada. I forgot the song. Teach it to me. I won't forget it again, but you've got to sing it to me. You know what I'll do. Silence. Are you listening to me? Teach me that song. Silence. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to crunch your bones. Sing it. Silence. And now Coyote pounced. He took Cicada's shell, the one that was filled with rocks, and bit down as hard as he could and broke several teeth, bent several others, and now Coyote had a song. He had a song that he sang on his way home. Sometimes you can still hear Coyote singing his crying song. Now, everybody, well, this is still audience participation. So in case you are a little rusty with your Coyote howling, please unmute everybody. I'm going to need to hear this. Everybody unmuted. I'm putting on my glasses to make sure everybody's unmuted. Okay. Okay, Luce, you got to unmute there. I want to hear you. We're going to sing Coyote's crying song, but you know, coyotes stretch their necks up when they sing, right? So
Yeah.
you're good. Everybody stretch your necks up. And when coyotes cry or sing, they stick out their tongue. And, you know,
Next one, Louis.
they all have fleas, so you're going to scratch your fleas. So everybody, heads up, tongues out, got fleas and howl. And that's Coyote's crying song. And if you ever get close enough to a coyote to take a close look at his dentures, you'll see that many of them are quite crooked and bent. And that's from the time that he tried to steal Cicada's beautiful song. Thanks, everybody.
Fantastic.
Okay.
That was cool. Did you see the joke in the chat, Bob?
My hearing is not so good particularly over Zoom. So again,
Did you see the joke on the chat? What's the difference between a coyote and a flea?
no.
One howls on the prairie and one prowls on the hairy. World Storytelling Cafe, somebody put that on. Yes.
Oh, that'll be Mike. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in the absence of Bubba C, Mike seems to be taking his place.
I think I'll take.
Mike.
I'm going to use that as a riddle that the king and the flea uses for the next story.
Excellent.
Our dog is very excited since the coyote noises. He's running around. He wants to go for a walk.
You know,
Rona, I'm not sure you saw the message, but are you available next Friday?
Yes, that's the 8th, isn't it?
That is indeed. Now, if we pretend tonight didn't happen, that it was always going to be Bob, and it was always going to be you next Friday, the world would be in place, wouldn't it? In a correct manner.
Yes.
Marvelous.
I'm delighted with that. That's grand. But I'm quite glad because I've just really enjoyed the stories tonight.
Yeah, I was thinking that you had a smile on your face the whole way through, and I'm thinking you wouldn't have been here live if there hadn't been for. So I did that intentionally, so you would get a really good night. Rona. So I'll take credit for that.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to hear you this time, but I'll be looking for you the next time.
Well,
And John,
you have to come on the site next Friday to sort of repay Bob in the interest of egalitarians. Now, the most important person in the room, of course, is Louis.
Mhm.
So we'll have your verdict, Louis. What do you think of tonight? Did you like Bob? Shall we invite Bob back?
So, Luis,
Yes, of course. He's, as you know, he is the best because I love his songs and stories.
Fantastic.
Well,
There's
Lou,
there's an accolade.
Thanks,
Right.
John.
So what have we got coming up?
Thank you.
Now I know what's coming up. I can announce it. So Tuesday we have our at 5 o'clock, an hour earlier than this. We have our young storytellers, our young international storytellers. It's been a bit lax lately, but it's either a lot come on or nobody. But please come and support them on the basis that they will arrive. And next Friday at 6 p.m. UK, Irish, and Morocco time, we have the wonderful, the amazing, the fantastic Rona Barbour. Right, who will still be in Italy? Will you still be in Italy?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, it'll be 7 o'clock my time, but then I'll be able to tune in.
So now all those messages I was getting from Babasi saying, please contact Rona, makes sense now. I'm thinking, I know I'm very relieved that I was thinking maybe something was wrong with Rona, but it was just merely a scheduling hiccup. So fantastic. So Rona next Friday.
Grand. See you all then.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Bob, that was an amazing night.
It was lovely. Yeah.
I loved that first story. I loved all of them. I especially loved the first one. Can I steal it? Can I borrow it?
You're muted,
You're
Bob.
muted, Bob. You're muted.
You're muted. I love this.
I was just saying, it just gave me joy to be here to see and hear, to see your faces and hear your voices. You know, after a long absence, it seems like a dream. America seems like a dream right now, and a wonderful dream. This is great to see you again.
Marvelous.
Well, thanks for
sorry, Mike. Carry on.
Yeah. No, I was just saying thank you. And there's the onion story, the onion and garlic story. There's a Moroccan version of that which Richard Hamilton collected, which is in his last storyteller book, and it's about the focus of it is a lamp, which was not known to the king, which is such a wonderful and precious and treasured thing. So it's interesting to see how stories travel, isn't it?
I've got the book,
and the one I got from Toop, it was a calabash. So
there's a children's book version where the hero washes up on an island where the sand is diamonds, but they're worthless in that land. He can't even trade an onion for a diamond.
Wow.
So
there's I'm really interested in been thinking about this a lot, that it's a theme that shows up in so many different folk tales in so many different ways, which really has to do with what has value, what's worth striving for, how much is enough, how much is too much, gluttons, misers, value. And I'm always looking for stories that deal with that theme. So I'm happy to get suggestions.
And of course, all these stories, when they were told in the first place, were usually told by poor people, and they were given to children to give them hope that things could work out, that there is always the possibility. It's kind of like the American dream is nothing new. It's been existing in stories forever. So anyway, so thank you again, Bob. I think a rousing a round of applause. If I wasn't holding this phone in one hand, I would do it. But
Woo!
whoa!
Yee-hoo!
Thanks for Louis. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks for having me, John.
You keep us all going.
Excellent.
And we'll see you next Friday, Rona. Thank you, everyone who came on, and
Yeah.
thank you, Waleed, for flying the magic carpet
Thank
as
you, Waleed.
always.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I never didn't see you, but
Friday.
know you're there. So thank you so much.
Great to see you, Bob.
Mike.
Give our
See you next
give our
Friday.
best to Liz, Bob.
I will.
Same.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Bob.
Bye, Louis. Bye, Waleed. Bye.
Bye.